other districts used to look to Detroit Public Schools for strategies to implement in their school. And if you take a look at the history, the enrollment decline, and then also we had poor coverage from the news when the state took over. Remember, we had the state takeover, which was a failure. We had the emergency manager, which was a failure. So all of these variables play a factor in the decline of Detroit public schools.
Wow, that's right.
Sorry, it looked like I was freezing up. So I think for me, initially when I chose the school, when my kids first started out, we were living in Sterling Heights. So of course, at that time, I chose a school that was in the area because it was for convenience. So I think that sometimes when parents make choices, it depends on what situation they're in at that time, and that kind of guides their decisions as to where they'll put their children. So for me at that time, it was convenient for me to put my child in the Sterling Heights school district. However, things changed. I came back to the city, and then it was priority. Okay, you know what? My child needs to be with Detroit Public Schools because that's the system that I grew up in.
Yeah.
And I remember I have nothing but great memories of what my teachers, like the lengths that they went to make sure that I understood certain things, to make sure that I got enough exposure. That was always my experience. And it's always surprising when I hear people say anything negative about Detroit Public Schools, because I'm like, wow, that's not the district that I know. You know, being that I'm a product of Detroit Public Schools and being an educator in Detroit Public Schools. And something I really, really want to point out. So my stepdaughter, she's 21. She started out in Detroit Public Schools, but she ended up in the suburban schools. So her foundation was awesome. My son started out in Detroit Public Schools. My daughter, my 16-year-old, she started out in Sterling Heights. And it's like no shade to, really in Sterling Heights. But I know that I had to work with her a little bit differently. It took her a little bit, like her foundation to me was not as solid as my son and my stepdaughter, who began in Detroit Public School. So basically, the school that they ended up in, I did look at test scores. I looked at extracurricular. I know Ms. April was talking about, and Dr. Peart said that they talked about, the schools being foreign language, so the extracurricular. I looked at the extra things that they have. I looked at the parent organizations and how they're like the reputation. So it was a lot of things that I had to consider, and especially by the time my kids came back home to DPS, or my daughter, I should say. I had to consider those things, especially at that point, because I was single, and I knew that I would be the one who would probably do the most, transportation, support, at that point. So those were the things that I looked
at. Man. Let's go ahead and raise the roof for y'all real quick, man. All these mommies up in here doing the thing, man. I gotta understand, like, y'all are some hard. Just thank you so much, hard workers. Thank you so much. You said something really important, Lisa. You all have said something really important. And what stood out to me, you were saying how Detroit gets a negative connotation. Where does that come from? We're in the Midwest. We're not in the South, right? Growing up in the South, you always told that racism is going to hit you direct.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Northeast, it's probably going to hit you from behind, but it's probably not present. But we don't really talk too much about the Midwest. Talk about that, those racial dynamics here in the Midwest, and how does that factor in school choice here, if that makes any sense? Anybody?
Well, one thing I think is really important to point out, Detroit is, when you compare, even let's just say Michigan, when Detroit is compared to other, and you're going to hear, you know what I'm saying? If you going like to think about numbers is unfair, because Detroit is a larger district. So you may hear more things out of Detroit because you have more things, it's like, say for instance, if they did percentage wise, it probably would not factor out to be how it would be in a suburban district. But if you're just doing it based off of numbers, to me that would be unfair. You can't base it off of numbers, because you're going to hear like, and especially if you're focused on negative things. And then of course, because it's an inner city district, if you look at the things, look at certain things that are awarded or that, okay, real quick, sorry. Detroit is considered a community district. There are laws put in place for community districts that are not put in place for other districts. Well, what was that, a couple of years ago, where Detroit was named from Detroit Public Schools to Detroit Public Schools Community District. Well, that particular law that's in place, and I'm sorry I can't like say it word from word, but it only applies to our Brown district.
Wow, that's true.